Never thought I'd be the type of man who'd sit back and watch an entire neighborhood rise out of my land without my permission. But life has a way of testing patience, and this was one of those moments. It all started 5 years ago when I inherited a stretch of land from my grandfather. He was an old rancher, a man of grit, stubbornness, and a love for open space. The property wasn't just a patch of dirt. It was a massive, sprawling 600 acres of hills, valleys, and streams, surrounded by pine forest on one side and farmland on the other. Most people didn't even know it existed. My grandfather was quiet about ownership. He believed in keeping his affairs private and rarely spoke of what he had. When the papers landed in my hands, I realized that the land had never been subdivided, never sold, never split. It was still legally intact, the way it had been passed down from my great-grandfather. In short, it was one continuous estate, and I was its sole owner. But here's the kicker. A small group of developers had gotten it into their heads that the land was up for grabs. And at the center of it all was Karen, the self-proclaimed HOA president of a community that technically didn't exist when she started her conquest. Karen was the type of woman who thought she was untouchable. Perfectly manicured nails, a permanent scowl hidden behind an artificial smile, and a stack of clipboards she carried like a sheriff's badge. She strutted around in pastel cardigans and oversized sunglasses, barking orders at construction crews, bullying neighbors, and introducing herself as the authority. I first heard about her when a local contractor I knew called me one morning. "Hey, are you aware they're building houses out on your property?" I froze. "What are you talking about?" "No one's building anything on my land." "That's funny," he said dryly, "because I just turned down a contract offer from a woman calling herself Karen. Says she's head of the HOA in a new subdivision. She's got about a dozen foundations poured already." I thought he was joking until I drove out there. My grandfather's quiet hills were now crawling with trucks, bulldozers, and workers hammering frames together. Lumber was stacked in neat piles, nails clinked in the air, and the scent of fresh cut wood filled the valley. At the top of the hill stood Karen herself, arms folded like a general surveying her troops. I parked and stormed up to her. "What the hell is going on here?" She tilted her sunglasses down just enough to look at me, unimpressed. "Excuse me, sir, this is private property. You're trespassing." I nearly laughed. "Private property? Lady, this is my land. You're the one trespassing." Karen rolled her eyes, clearly used to brushing people off. "Oh, don't be ridiculous. This land belongs to the Evergreen Meadows HOA. We've already begun development. You'll have to take your little complaints up with the board." "The board?" I repeated, incredulous. "Yes, the board," she said smugly, "of which I am the president. Now, unless you'd like me to call the sheriff for interfering with ongoing construction, I suggest you leave." I could feel my jaw tightening. She actually thought she could gaslight me into leaving my own property. Instead of losing my temper, I pulled out my phone and opened the land registry app. "Here's the deed," I said, shoving the screen in her face. "Filed under my name. This land has never been sold. I own every inch of it. So, unless you've got some miracle paperwork that says otherwise, you're the trespasser." Karen didn't even flinch. "Deeds can be disputed," she snapped. "And besides, we've already invested millions into construction here. Families are counting on these homes. Do you really want to be responsible for destroying the American dream?" The audacity of this woman stunned me. She was building houses without permission and somehow trying to guilt me for objecting. "I'll give you one chance to stop this nonsense," I said evenly. "Pack up your crew, take down your signs, and leave my land before I call in lawyers." Her smirk widened. "Go ahead. Call your lawyers. By the time you figure out how slow the courts are, these houses will be finished, sold, and occupied. What's a judge going to do then? Kick 98 families out of their homes? Not likely." That was the first time she said the number out loud. 98. She wasn't just building a handful of houses. She was planning an entire subdivision, and that's when I knew this wasn't just arrogance. This was a calculated land grab for the next several weeks. I watched as Evergreen Meadows grew like a weed. First came the paved roads, then the street signs, then the houses themselves. Karen walked the property daily, clipboard in hand, directing workers, berating anyone who slowed her schedule. By the end of the second month, dozens of homes were framed and half a dozen were nearly finished. Neighbors started showing up at her little sales office, a prefab trailer parked near the entrance. She sold them the idea of a clean, safe neighborhood with modern homes, community parks, and of course, a prestigious HOA that she controlled. She promised buyers that everything was legitimate. Don't worry, I overheard her telling a couple one afternoon. All the land disputes are handled. This community is perfectly legal. You're making the best decision of your life. And the worst part? People believed her. Some even began moving in, decorating front lawns, planting flowers, setting up porch furniture. At night, porch lights twinkled across the valley like a town that had been there for years. But behind the illusion, it was all still mine. Every fence post, every lamppost, every freshly poured driveway. Mind, I could have rushed to court immediately, but something in me said wait. Let her build. Let her invest. Let her dig herself so deep that when I finally pulled the rug out from under her, there would be no escape. I kept every receipt of land tax I'd paid. I filed updated surveys with the county. I double-checked that all the easements and borders were airtight. And then, when the house neared completion, I made my move. I called a meeting with my lawyer, a sharp man named Douglas who had a taste for dramatic takedowns. When I explained what Karen had done, he leaned back in his chair, smiling like a wolf. Let me get this straight, he said. This woman built 98 houses on land you legally own without ever purchasing or leasing it from you? Exactly. And she's been selling those houses to unsuspecting families? Yep. He steepled his fingers. This is the cleanest case of fraud and illegal development I've ever seen. Not only can we seize the property back, but we can also hold her personally liable for damages. She's looking at financial ruin. That was music to my ears. But before we acted, I wanted to see just how far Karen would go. One evening, I walked through the freshly built neighborhood. Children played on the sidewalks. Couples grilled in their backyards. A sense of community buzzed in the air. For a moment, I almost felt guilty. These people had no idea they were pawns in Karen's scheme. That guilt vanished the moment Karen spotted me. She stormed across the street, waving her clipboard like a sword. What are you doing here? She snapped. I told you to stay off this property. This is my property, I reminded her. Not anymore, she hissed. Evergreen Meadows belongs to the homeowners now. You're nothing but a bitter squatter trying to claim what's not yours. Her lies were so bold, it was almost impressive that I smiled. Keep talking, Karen. Every word you say makes my case stronger. Her face flushed. Case? Ha! By the time any court listens to you, this neighborhood will be thriving. You think the county is going to bulldoze 98 homes because you flashed a deed around? Not a chance. I leaned closer.
Vanna bet.
Her fake smile faltered for the first time, and that was when she realized I wasn't bluffing. Karen's mask cracked that night, but only for a second. By the next morning, she was back at it, strutting through Evergreen Meadows like the queen of a kingdom she didn't own. And here's the thing about people like Karen. They don't just fight battles, they stage performances. She knew how to talk, how to twist the truth, how to smile just enough to convince desperate buyers that she was on their side. The next weekend, I drove out to the property again, this time with my lawyer, Douglas. We parked near the entrance where a massive "Welcome to Evergreen Meadows" luxury homes from the $400s banner stretched across the temporary gates. As we stepped out, a young couple carrying grocery bags waved to us. Are you guys new homeowners? They asked, smiling warmly. I forced a polite smile. Not exactly, Douglas muttered under his breath. They have no clue they're standing on stolen dirt. And that was the hardest part. The people moving in weren't villains. They were families, retirees, young professionals scraping their savings to buy into the dream Karen had sold them. They had no idea they were pawns. We headed straight for Karen's sales trailer. Inside, glossy brochures lined the walls. Floor plans, playground renderings, even mock-ups of a community clubhouse that hadn't even broken ground yet. Karen herself sat behind a desk, flipping through papers like a CEO. She looked up, her lips curling into that practiced smile. Well, well. If it isn't the trespasser and his lawyer. Douglas didn't flinch. He stepped forward and set a thick file on her desk. Ms. Matthews, we're here to inform you, formally, that you are in violation of state law, county zoning ordinances, and multiple statutes concerning fraudulent property development. This land is owned by my client, and unless you cease construction immediately, you will be served with an injunction. Karen didn't even look at the papers. She laughed. You lawyers are all the same. Big threats, little bite. Do you have any idea how much money has already been poured into this community? You think a judge is going to side with one man waiving a deed when 98 families have already signed contracts? Don't make me laugh. Douglas smirked. Oh, we're not asking the judge to kick families out yet. We're going after you. Fraud, illegal sale of property you don't own, violation of county planning rules. Do you realize you're personally liable for every single dollar spent here? Her jaw tightened for a fraction of a second before she recovered. Empty threats. I leaned on her desk, lowering my voice. Enjoy the spotlight while you can, Karen. Because when the dust settles, you're going to be the one explaining to 98 families why their dream homes sit on land you don't own. For the first time, she didn't have a snappy comeback. Word spread fast after that meeting. Rumors rippled through Evergreen Meadows like wildfire. Some homeowners brushed it off, just a jealous landowner trying to make trouble, while others grew uneasy. One evening, a man in his 40s knocked on my truck window as I was parked near the entrance. Hey, he said cautiously. You're the guy claiming this land's yours, right? Not claiming, I corrected. It is mine. He sighed. Look, my wife and I just moved in. We've put everything we had into this place. If what you're saying is true, what happens to us? His voice cracked slightly, and I could see the weight of it on him that I softened. I don't want to hurt families like yours. My fight is with Karen. She lied to you. She sold you something that wasn't hers to sell. Legally, you should be compensated. But as far as I'm concerned, my land is my land. He nodded, defeated. She told us everything was above board. Said some bitter relative was just trying to stir up drama. I clenched my fists. She was even using my grandfather's legacy as a smear tactic. That was the moment I knew I had to go full throttle. Douglas filed the lawsuit within the week. It was a masterpiece of precision. Dozens of pages outlining fraudulent misrepresentation, unlawful development, trespass, and racketeering. The county responded quickly. Inspectors swarmed Evergreen Meadows, snapping photos, taking measurements, marking violations. Construction crews slowed, nervous about getting caught in the crossfire. Karen, of course, staged a rally point one Saturday morning. She gathered as many homeowners as she could in front of the sales trailer. She stood on a makeshift podium, megaphone in hand, preaching like some suburban general. Do not let these outsiders intimidate us, she boomed. This is our community. We built this with our hard-earned money, and no greedy land baron is going to take it from us. We stand united. Cheers erupted from some, but not all. I noticed the cracks forming. A handful of families stood off to the side, whispering nervously, clearly unsure if they'd been duped. Karen spotted me in the crowd and pointed her megaphone directly at me. There he is, she barked. The so-called landowner trying to destroy your homes. Look at him. He doesn't care about you. He wants to profit off your misery. Boos followed, but so did silence. Some people looked at me, waiting for me to respond. I stepped forward. Every single house here, I said loudly, is built on land my family has owned for generations. I have the deeds, the surveys, the tax receipts to prove it. Karen never bought this property, never leased it, never asked permission. She lied to you. And when the courts finish with her, you'll see the truth. The crowd buzzed. Some yelled back, but others shifted uncomfortably. A young mother clutched her baby tighter. Her face paled, Karen's face twisted. Lies. Don't listen to him. He's nothing but a con man trying to steal from you. Douglas leaned close to me. Let her rant. The more she denies, the harder she falls. And fall she did, just not YETBY midsummer. The lawsuit was heating up. Karen's lawyers tried to argue adverse possession, Basically, that because Evergreen Meadows existed and families were moving in, they should gain legal ownership despite my deed. It was laughable, but it bought her time. Meanwhile, she doubled down on her HOA president persona. She started fining residents for leaving trash cans out, for painting shutters the wrong color, even for kids riding bikes too fast down the street. Her iron grip on the neighborhood turned sour. The very families she had tricked began turning against her. One evening, I was walking the property line when a group of residents approached me. "We believe you," one woman said quietly. "We've seen the paperwork. Karen hasn't shown us a single real document. She just keeps telling us to trust her." Another man added, "If this really is your land, what happens to us? Do we get kicked out?" I hesitated. "That's for the courts to decide. But I promise you, I'll fight to make sure you're compensated. I don't want innocent people punished for her greed." They nodded, grateful. For the first time, I felt the tide turning. Then came the day that changed everything. County officials posted bright orange notices on several unfinished homes. "Stop work order." Karen lost it. She stormed out into the street, tearing the signs down, screaming at inspectors, threatening lawsuits. But it didn't matter. Legally, construction was frozen, and yet she still wouldn't quit. She started holding secret late-night meetings with crews, sneaking them into finished jobs under cover of darkness. She paid off contractors in cash, whispering that it was all temporary, that she had a plan. What she didn't know was that Douglas had hired a private investigator. Photos were taken. Videos recorded. Every sneaky move she made was documented. By the time our court date arrived, the evidence against her was stacked taller than the houses she'd built. But Karen walked into the courthouse with her chin high, pastel sweater pressed, sunglasses perched like armor. She wasn't going down without a fight, and I couldn't wait to see her squirm. The courthouse was buzzing that morning. Rows of polished benches filled quickly with reporters, curious locals, and even some of the homeowners from Evergreen Meadows. For most of them, this was more than a case. It was their future on the line. And I sat at the plaintiff's table beside Douglas, who looked calm as ever, tapping his pen against a thick binder stuffed with evidence. Across the aisle, Karen sat with her legal team. She wore a pale blue blazer, pearls, and a smile that screamed, "I'm untouchable," but I could see the tension in her eyes. The judge entered, and the bailiff called the case. Matthews versus Dawson. My name against hers. Ownership versus illusion. Douglas opened with quiet authority. He laid out the story step by step. My family's uninterrupted ownership of the land, the valid deed, the taxes paid, the surveys filed, the fact that Karen had never once purchased, leased, or been granted access to the property. He didn't need theatrics. The truth was theatrical enough. When it was Karen's turn, her attorney strutted up like he was about to win a standing ovation. "Your Honor, what we have here is not theft, but progress. Evergreen Meadows is a thriving community, a testament to growth and opportunity. My client, Ms. Matthews, has provided homes for nearly 100 families. To strip them of that now would be unconscionable." The judge leaned forward. "Did your client ever purchase this land from the rightful owner?" The attorney shifted. "Well, not exactly. But adverse possession." Douglas cut in like a knife. Adverse possession requires open, notorious use for years, decades, in most states. Ms. Matthews has been here less than 18 months. The judge raised an eyebrow. "Do you have any legal documents at all showing transfer of ownership to your client?" Silence. Karen shifted uncomfortably, but then stood, uninvited, clutching her clipboard like it was holy scripture. "Your Honor, this man is a greedy land baron. He doesn't care about these families. He wants to bulldoze their homes just to prove a point. He's heartless." The judge slammed his gavel. "Ms. Matthews, you will sit down and let your attorney speak for you." The gallery murmured. Even the residents who had once cheered for her looked uneasy. Douglas smiled faintly. The cracks were widening. Over the next week, testimony after testimony painted the picture of Karen's scheme. Contractors admitted she paid them in cash, often under the table, promising the paperwork would catch up. County officials testified that she never filed a single permit request. Buyers revealed she had shown them mock documents with county seals that turned out to be forgeries, and then came the smoking gun. Douglas called the private investigator to the stand. Screens lit up with photos and videos of Karen sneaking crews in at night to continue construction after the stop work orders. The courtroom gasped. Karen's face flushed crimson. She leaned toward her attorney, hissing something sharp, but it was too late. The damage was done. Douglas turned to the judge. Your Honor, what we have here is not a well-meaning mistake. It is calculated fraud. She knew she didn't own this land. She knew she had no authority. And yet she built 98 homes and sold them under false pretenses. My client isn't the villain here. He's the victim of theft on a massive scale. The judge nodded slowly, his eyes heavy on Karen. That night, after court adjourned, I walked the neighborhood again. Some residents avoided me, still clinging to Karen's lies. But others approached with questions. A mother of 3 asked, "Are we going to lose our house?" A retired veteran demanded, "Why isn't she in jail already?" And a young man with calloused hands, probably a first-time buyer, whispered, "I put every dime I had into this place. If it goes under, I've got nothing." Their desperation weighed on me. They weren't my enemies. They were Karen's victims. But they looked at me like I held the guillotine rope, and I realized then that no matter what happened in court, the aftermath would be messy. Families might sue her. Banks might foreclose. The county might step in. And through it all, Karen would never admit fault. Back in court, her defense grew more desperate. Karen took the stand herself. She painted herself as a hero, a visionary who had revitalized barren land and given life to a new community. She cried, dabbing her eyes with a silk handkerchief, claiming she was being persecuted for caring too much. But Douglas dismantled her theatrics piece by piece. "Ms. Matthews," he asked, voice cool, "do you recognize this document?" She squinted. That's a survey map." "Yes." "A survey map from 10 years ago. And whose name is clearly printed as owner of the parcel?" "His," she muttered, pointing at me. "Correct. And do you recognize this tax receipt?" "Yes." "And whose name is on it?" "His." "And this deed, filed with the county recorder?" Her voice cracked. "His." Douglas let the silence hang, the weight of the truth pressing down. Then he said, "No further questions." Karen looked like a balloon slowly losing air. Outside the courthouse, the media swarmed. Cameras flashed, microphones shoved in my face. "Sir, what do you plan to do with Evergreen Meadows if you win? Will families be forced to leave? Are you going to demolish the homes?" I kept my answer measured. My fight is with Karen. She lied, cheated, and stole. The families here deserve justice, and I'll do everything in my power to see they get it. But ownership is ownership. The land is mine. Behind me, Karen pushed through the crowd, her voice shrill. "Don't believe him. He's lying. I built this community. These people love me." But the people didn't look at her with love anymore. They looked at her with suspicion, even betrayal. Weeks passed as the case dragged on. Karen tried every trick, filing counterclaims, accusing me of harassment, even staging a community support rally that barely drew a dozen people. Meanwhile, Douglas filed motion after motion, stacking the odds higher. He even began working with county prosecutors who were sniffing around for criminal charges. Fraud, forgery, wire fraud. The list grew longer by the day, and through it all, I stayed quiet, patient. Let her thrash. Let her dig deeper, because soon, the hammer would fall. Point one evening, as the sun dipped over the hills, I stood on a ridge overlooking Evergreen Meadows. Porch lights flickered on below, little beacons of human hope trapped in a web of lies. It struck me how surreal it all was. 98 homes, nearly 100 families, all perched on land my grandfather once used to graze cattle. Land he protected fiercely, never selling an acre. Land he trusted me to safeguard, and I clenched my fists. "Don't worry, Grandpa," I whispered. "I won't let her steal it." Behind me, Douglas approached, hands in his pockets. "Big day tomorrow," he said. "Yeah." "You ready for the verdict?" I exhaled slowly. "More than ready." Because no matter what Karen believed, no matter how many lies she told, no matter how many families she tried to use as shields, tomorrow would prove what I'd known all along. The land was mine, and she was about to lose everything. The courtroom was silent on the morning of the verdict. You could have heard a pin drop as the judge shuffled his papers and cleared his throat. I sat rigid, my heart thudding in my chest. Across the aisle, Karen sat perfectly still, her pearl necklace gleaming under the fluorescent lights. She wore the same smug smile she always did, as if convinced she was about to walk free. But her eyes told a different story. The judge spoke. After reviewing the evidence presented, it is the ruling of this court that ownership of the land in question, parcel 214 through parcel 322, totaling approximately 600 acres, rests solely and legally with Mr. Dawson. The court further finds that Ms. Karen Matthews engaged in fraudulent development, misrepresentation, and unlawful sale of property she did not own. As such, an injunction is hereby granted halting all activity by Evergreen Meadows HOA, effective immediately. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Some homeowners whispered frantically. Others sat in stunned silence. The judge wasn't finished. Furthermore, this court refers the matter to the county prosecutor for review of possible criminal charges. Ms. Matthews, your actions may rise to the level of criminal fraud. Karen's smile collapsed. The gavel came down. Court adjourned. It was over. Chaos erupted outside the courthouse. Reporters swarmed, homeowners shouted questions, cameras flashed in every direction. Douglas and I pushed through the crowd, but I could hear the voices all around me. What happens to our homes? Are we going to lose everything? Is she going to jail? And then I heard Karen. They're lying, she screamed, her voice shrill as she shoved past reporters. This isn't over. I built Evergreen Meadows. I made this community. You can't just take it away from me. No one listened. The crowd that once cheered her now jeered. A homeowner shouted, "You lied to us, Karen." Another yelled, "You stole our money." For the first time, Karen looked small. The weeks that followed were messy. The county froze her assets. Banks launched investigations. Families who bought homes began filing lawsuits against her personally. Contractors demanded unpaid wages. Every piece of her empire crumbled at once. And Evergreen Meadows? It became a ghost of its own ambition. Construction halted permanently. Half-finished homes stood empty, frames rattling in the wind. Those already moved in faced an uncertain future, technically trespassing on my land, though I didn't push for eviction. Instead, I worked with Douglas to craft a plan. We negotiated with banks, explored leasing agreements, and even offered buyout options to homeowners who wanted to stay. It wasn't simple, but I wasn't heartless. Karen had weaponized those families against me. I wasn't about to do the same. Some chose to leave, bitter and broken. Others stayed, turning Evergreen Meadows into a strange hybrid community, part neighborhood, part monument to hubris. But either way, the power shifted. They knew the truth. Now the land was mine. And Karen, the county pressed charges. Fraud. Forgery. White fraud. Racketeering. She fought tooth and nail, hiring new lawyers, crying on local news stations, painting herself as the victim of a corrupt land grab. But nobody believed her anymore. When the jury found her guilty, she collapsed in her chair. The same woman who once strutted across my hills with a clipboard and a smirk was now just another criminal awaiting sentencing. She got 7 years, 0.7 years to think about the 98 homes she built on land she didn't own. 1 evening, months after the dust had settled, I walked the ridge again. The valley below was quiet. Porch lights still twinkled, but fewer now. Some homes stood empty, dark and hollow. Others glowed with stubborn resilience, families clinging to the life they'd built despite the chaos. I thought of my grandfather, of the way he used to lean on a fence post, watching cattle graze, saying, "Land doesn't lie. People do, but land always remembers who it belongs to." He was right. Karen tried to rewrite the truth with her lies, her brochures, her pastel-colored fantasies. But in the end, the land told the real story. It remembered. And it chose me, I smiled, breathing deep of the cool night air. Rest easy, Grandpa, I whispered. It's ours again.